No matter what it is that you're doing, you have to do it well. So when her parents took her diaper off, the adhesive from the diaper tab caught this birthmark. My favorite thing about the job is that it's different every day. When we get called to an emergency, we drop everything and we go.
Access to knowledge, opportunity for exploration.
Join us in exploring careers, passions, and more.
Hi, I'm Sunny.
I'm Sahana.
And I'm Nivi. And we are By Youth, for Youth.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of By Youth for Youth. Today I'm here with Mr. Lavacchi from the fire department, and we're here to talk to him today about his job. So Mr. Lavacchi, I was wondering if you could just give us a quick description of your job.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me. My name is Anthony Lavacchi. I'm a Battalion Chief with the Battalion Fire Department. So a quick description of my job. As a Battalion Chief, I'm more of a supervisor than I am a line firefighter. So I'll explain that in a little bit. But is it all right if I describe what a typical day and what the fire department does? Because a lot of people
that would be great.
Great.
Yeah.
So the name fire department is a little bit misleading because we do a lot more than fires. So for example, yesterday we rescued a drone out of a tree. So we do a wide variety of services. Our core services are firefighting, and we also provide ambulance service to the village of Palatine. So those are our core services, but we really do everything in between. So we do get calls for cats in a tree. We do get calls for anything that you can think of. People call 911, and the fire department responds out to that to help them. So that's what the fire department does, again, which is pretty much everything. The way that the fire department works, in case you have a lot of folks that have never had contact with a firefighter before, is we work on a platoon system. So normally, most people go to work 9 to 5, 8 to 4, 8 hours a day, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. At the fire department, we work 24-hour shifts. So our workday starts at 8 a.m., and it goes until the next day at 8 a.m. So 24 straight hours. And we live at the fire station, and that's why it's called the firehouse, because we live there for 24 hours. There are 3 shifts. So today, one shift is working. Tomorrow at 8 a.m., a new shift comes in. And then the next day, a third shift comes in. And then it just keeps rotating. So I work every 3 days. So I'm going to go on duty. That's what we call our shift, is a duty shift. I'm going to go on duty tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'm going to work tomorrow, which is Wednesday, into Thursday morning. And then I'll report back to duty. And then I'll report back to duty on Saturday. So it's unique to the fire service. And most people, if they don't have a firefighter in the family or not a firefighter, they really have no idea how we work. Really, we work pretty constantly from 8 a.m. until about 5 p.m. And during that time, we'll do trainings, and those could vary from firefighter training to paramedic training to computer training. So we do a lot of different training throughout the day. And then what's really interesting about the fire department is at any time we could get an emergency call, and then we have to leave. So we're there to run emergency calls. So regardless of whatever else we're doing, when we get called to an emergency, we drop everything and we go. So whatever you're doing, whether it's you're in the shower, you're brushing your teeth, you're working out, you're doing a training, or anything else, cooking dinner or lunch, call comes in, we leave. So that's one of the things that makes the fire department really interesting, is that every day is the same, but different.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, do you sleep during your shifts too, and then you just have to get waken up if there's an emergency, or?
Sure, that's a great question. So yes, we do have bunk rooms and beds, and we have places to sleep. So typically at the fire station, after 9 o'clock, you can go to bed if you want, but when there's an emergency call, we get up and go on it. So we're on duty for 24 hours. We run calls anytime during that 24-hour period. Sometimes we get to sleep at night through the entire night. Most of the times we don't. But yes, we are able to sleep at the firehouse.
Oh, okay. So, what's the most common call that you get? Because I assume that it's not fires, but I don't know. So,
Well, that's a very good assumption. Most of the calls that we go on are EMS or emergency medical service calls, so ambulance calls.
oh,
Anywhere,
okay.
anywhere between 75 and 80% of the calls that we run are ambulance calls. Now, on an ambulance call, if you've ever seen an ambulance in your neighborhood or on the street, typically when an ambulance is responding to an emergency, you'll see a fire engine behind it. And that's because whenever we go on an ambulance call, we send an ambulance and we send a support vehicle, which could be a fire engine or a rescue squad or a ladder truck. And the reason we do that is we send it for manpower, because two people on an ambulance may or may not be able to deal with whatever situation they show up on. So sometimes, and frequently, we have to carry people. So we either have to carry them downstairs, out of a house. So that's why we send an ambulance and a fire apparatus. So we have 4 to 5 people. And sometimes we'll even send 2 or 3 more fire apparatus so that we could have 7 or 9 people assisting on the call. Depends on the type of call, but usually we send 4 or 5 firefighter paramedics on an ambulance call.
And you also mentioned earlier that like during the day you're training. So does the training always change, and like is this a field where you're always learning new things?
So another great question. Yes. So again, every day is somewhat the same, the way the day's structured, but every day is different because the calls are different. We never know what kind of call we're going to go on. And then when we get there, the ambulance call that we had yesterday is not necessarily going to be the same as the ambulance call we had today because people have different emergencies. So for trainings, we do a wide variety of trainings. So tomorrow we're going to be doing firefighting training where we're going to be practicing opening doors that are locked. And the way that we open doors that are locked is that we force them open. So when I say force them open, it means we use tools and brute force to open doors that are locked because we don't have the keys. So we have to practice that skill. And there's many different types of doors and there's different ways to get through those doors for us as firefighters. So we're practicing that skill tomorrow. Next week, and we do this every month on Tuesdays, we do paramedic recertification. We call it continuing education hours. So we'll sit in class and we'll go over paramedic stuff for 2.5 hours. And every month is a different topic. So one month is cardiac arrest. One month might be pediatric emergencies. Another month might be cold emergencies, which is things that we could run into this time of year with ice and freezing water and cold temperatures. But we do those trainings as well. And then occasionally we'll do trainings on the computer. Our IT department will send us some trainings to help us figure out spam and phishing attacks on our email and things for us to look at. So it's a wide variety of training that we do, but primarily we do firefighting training and EMS, emergency medical service training.
Oh wow! So you do like a little bit of everything. Yeah.
We do,
That's
and
really
that's
cool.
that's what makes the job so interesting, is that you really get to learn a lot of different things, and you have to be pretty good at a lot of different things because you never know what you're going to get called to. Like I said yesterday, we got called to a person that had a drone that they crashed into a tree, and they asked if we could help. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. In this case, we were able to get the drone down, and it turned out it was a $5,000 drone. So the gentleman
wow.
was pretty happy that we were able to get his drone out of a tree.
Yeah. Yeah, because especially like computer training and stuff is not something I would expect. Like, if I thought of a firefighter, I wouldn't expect, oh, that's the type of training they go through.
Yeah,
So,
and what's pretty interesting about our profession is that we have firefighters that come from all walks of life. So we have firefighters that are blue collar workers, if you will, that are construction workers when they're not firefighting, or landscapers, or other physical jobs. And then we have firefighters that have master's degrees in biology. Well, one of our guys has a master's degree, and he's an arborist, so he knows about trees. We have a wide variety of people at the fire department. It's a pretty interesting group. Very
Yeah.
smart.
I can imagine. So, so kind of switching topics a little bit.
Sure.
If you're willing to share, what was one of the like scariest or like craziest days on the job for you?
Oh gosh, let me take a look at my notes here and see if I had written that down. Um, I've had some really stressful calls, calls that were scary after the fact. So when you're in the middle of the call, you don't necessarily appreciate the danger or the severity of the call because you're focusing on what needs to be done and you're working. But after the fact, when you have an opportunity to think about what happened, then you start to realize, wow, that could have really went bad. So one of the calls that really was somewhat scary after the fact was and quite frankly, it was actually a little bit scary when the call was going on, is that we had a baby that had a hemangioma, which is a birthmark, but it's very vascular, and it was right by her diaper line. So when her parents took her diaper off, the adhesive from the diaper tab caught this birthmark and caused it to bleed. And little babies, babies are small, and babies don't have a lot of blood flowing around in their bodies. So if babies lose blood, it can be detrimental to them very quickly. And this baby had lost a fair amount of blood, and that was a pretty scary call because dealing with at that time it was probably I think a 3 or 4 month old baby, maybe a little bit younger. I don't recall exactly. And that was a scary call because we don't deal with babies a whole lot, and babies are much different than adults. Adults are much easier to deal with for us because we deal with them all the time. And that was one of those calls that was pretty scary. It worked out very well. She is a healthy adult at this point and doing very well.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
But that was a particularly scary call.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. So like, do you guys get training in, like in depth about medical advice, or do you have to consult doctors when getting like these kinds of calls?
Sure. So that's a great question. So at the Village of Palatine, our firefighters are also paramedics. So if you were to come by the fire station, you'll see firefighters. You'll see firefighters wearing blue shirts. You'll see firefighters wearing white shirts like I am, and the difference in color denotes white shirts are typically supervisors, or are always supervisors, and blue shirts are the line firefighters that do most of the hands-on work. So to answer your question, by us, all of our blue shirt firefighters are paramedics. So they're trained to the level of emergency medical technician paramedic, which allows us to do a lot of things when we're on the ambulance. So we can give medication, we can start IV lines, so intravenous lines. We can give people injections. We can do a lot of things to people that you wouldn't expect.
What was one of the most fascinating things you've learned on the job?
Wow, that's a hard one because there've been so many things that I've learned that I didn't know. I can't pick one thing. What I have learned is that being around people as much as we are at the fire department, it is fascinating to really experience the differences in people, because that's what we do. That's our job, is we deal with people, and when we deal with people, typically we're dealing with them at their worst times. So seeing how people react to stress and seeing how people react to difficulties in their life, that's fascinating, and it's really interesting to see how we can affect that and how we can make their lives better in that moment, and really help them out.
Oh, okay. And when you get called for like these emergency calls, how do you choose who in the station goes on those calls?
So that's another great question. So I'll kind of explain how your 911 call works so that you have an idea of what's going on. So when you call 911, you're not calling the fire station. You're calling, so in Palatine, Rolling Meadows, Arlington Heights, Schaumburg, the northwest suburbs, but Palatine specifically because that's what I know about. When you call 911, you're not calling the fire station. You're calling Northwest Central Dispatch, which is a 911 dispatching center. And they're actually in Arlington Heights. So they have a computer system, and as they're asking you questions, so you're going to call 911, they're going to pick up the phone and say, 911, what's your emergency? And you're going to say, there's a house fire at 123 Main Street in Palatine. So while they're talking to you, they're typing in that address, 123 Main Street, Palatine, and then they're picking the button that corresponds to your emergency, which would be a house fire. When they push that button, the computer automatically dispatches the vehicles that are supposed to go on that call. So that's how we get notified. Inside the fire station, we have speakers and lights, and message boards that show us that, okay, it alerts us that there's a call, and then it tells us who's supposed to go on the call.
So as the shifts change, do people change from like the rescue squad to the ladder squad, or does it stay consistent throughout like an entire year? Or
sometimes what'll happen is that we will rotate and let people go to different positions. So sometimes they'll ride on the rescue squad, sometimes they'll ride on the ladder truck, sometimes they'll ride on an ambulance, sometimes they'll ride in a fire engine. Now, where that changes is our first line supervisors are lieutenants, and the lieutenant is in charge of the fire station and the 5 people that are at the fire station that particular day. The lieutenant rides in the front seat of the fire engine, and he's responsible for the actions of the fire engine and the ambulance. So the lieutenant is always on a fire engine, a ladder truck, or a rescue squad. They're not on an ambulance typically. The shift commander, which is my role, is I'm in the shift commander car, and that's the only vehicle that I ride in. But the blue shirt firefighters can vary their roles depending on the needs of the department at that time.
Oh, okay. So did you choose this position, or did you work your way up, or why did you choose this position?
So another great question. So when you get hired at the fire department, you get hired as a firefighter paramedic.
Okay.
So that's how I started. And then throughout my career, I was very fortunate and had opportunities for promotion. And I put in for those opportunities. But yes, I put in to get to the position that I'm at. I've been at the fire department for 24 years. And I've been a shift commander for about 8 of those 24 years.
Oh, that's really cool. So, I remember you saying at the beginning that like everyone kind of comes from a different background at the fire station. So I was wondering, what was your background? What was your path through school to get to where you are now?
And so I have I think an interesting kind of story on how that happened. I never knew any firefighters my entire life.
Oh.
And which is, when I look at it now, is kind of odd. I thought everybody knew firefighters, but apparently not. I didn't know any. So when I was growing up, I had no thoughts of being a firefighter. And when I went to college, I decided that I wanted to sell water skis for a living. That's what I wanted to do, because that was my hobby, is what I really enjoyed doing. So I wanted to travel the country and be a sales rep and sell water skis. So when I got out of college, I got a job at a water ski shop and did that for a number of years. And during the summer, there were the same 2 guys that came into the store, middle of the day, middle of the week, all the time. And finally, one day I asked them, I said, "What do you guys do for a living that you're here all the time?" And they said, "Well, we're firemen." And I said, "Really? How does that work?" And they kind of explained to me the schedule and what the job entailed. And shortly thereafter, the place I was working at went out of business. And at the time, my dad said, "Well, why don't you take a fire department test?" And I never thought of that. And I said, "Well, okay, I'll try it." And sure enough, I started taking fire department tests. And 3 years later, the Village of Palatine called and offered me a job. And that's how I got my start in the fire service. And knew absolutely nothing about the fire service, knew nothing about firefighting, knew very little about EMT and being on the ambulance. And I've learned all those things then over the last 24 years.
Oh, okay. So I didn't really expect that. I don't know. That's not what I expected. And that's cool to know that that you don't have to go a specific path to get to being a firefighter, because you kind of learn throughout the job, right? And then that's how you're taught.
Correct. So things are a little bit different now, and they've been this way probably for the last 10 to 12 years.
Oh.
So when I got hired at the fire department, I was not a firefighter and I was not a paramedic. So at that time, the fire department sent me to paramedic school and trained me to become a paramedic. And they sent me to fire school as well. Over the last 10 to 12 years, most of the people that we hire are firefighters already, and more importantly, are already paramedics.
And then also I was wondering, so you were really interested in water skiing, right? So, are you still able to keep these hobbies as a firefighter, or do you not get enough time to pursue other hobbies?
Well, one of the great things about the firefighter schedule, so that we work 24 hours and that we're off 48 hours, is that you do have time to pursue hobbies and pursue other things. One of the downsides to the schedule of the firefighter schedule of being on for 24 hours is that when it's your work day, it's your work day for the most part. So if it's Christmas and I'm scheduled to work, it's Christmas and I go work. If it's my birthday and I'm scheduled to work, I go to work. So there are things that you miss because of the schedule, but there are other opportunities that you get because of the schedule. So yeah, so I still get to do a fair amount of water sports and outdoors. I do a lot of outdoor things, so I do get an opportunity to do those things with the schedule that I have. Yes.
Yeah. And then also, what's your favorite part about the job? Like, yeah, your most favorite part about the job.
Sure. So I talked about it a little bit earlier. My favorite thing about the job is that it's different every day. And I can tell you that over the 24 years that I've been at the fire department, there's not been one day where I dreaded going to work. I love my job and I love going to work. There are days certainly where I would have rather not had to go to work, but I've never dreaded going to work my entire career. And that is something that I don't know if most people are able to say, but I've been very fortunate that I love what I do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't know, like, especially with this podcast, we're hoping that, like, we can help people, like, find jobs that they're passionate about. So, because I feel like that's a real problem lately, where a lot of people don't love their job and see their job as something that they have to do rather than something they want to do. So,
Yeah, that's if you can find something that you really enjoy and that you can make a living doing it, then you're truly blessed. A lot of people can't, and that's okay. And there are times where I had to do jobs that I did because they were jobs and I needed to do them. I've just been very fortunate. And there's a lot of people that are in my shoes that have been fortunate, and there are a lot that are not. But you have to find the joy in whatever it is you're doing, and that's really important. So if it's my children are 19 and 16. My daughter is a freshman in college, and my son is a junior in high school. And I explain to them, and what I would explain to your listeners, if they're high school students, and really anybody, but is no matter what it is that you're doing, you have to do it well. And it may be temporary, the job that you're doing, because you're working to get somewhere else because you have something else that you're trying to do. But you have to do it well. You have to take pride in what you do. And if you're willing to work hard and take pride in what you do, you'll be successful no matter what. You just have to be willing. You have to be willing to work and be willing to put in the time.
yeah, that's definitely important. Um, Kind of switching gears a little bit, what's your least favorite part about the job?
So my least favorite part about my job in the fire service, or my job currently in the position that I'm in?
Um, Either one is fine, whichever one you want to answer.
Oh, well, so this, so because we live at the fire department, we have to do, it's a firehouse. So we have to do things around the house.
Oh.
And this is probably not the answer that you're looking for, but my least favorite thing to do at the firehouse is take out the garbage and dry dishes. And that's really, everything else I enjoy. Obviously with what we deal with at the fire department, we deal with people at their worst times. We also deal with some people at their best times where we may go there and help them with the birth of their child, or something that's super, super helpful. But we're also there at times when things are really bad, where they've lost loved ones. And that's probably the part of the job that I dislike. If there's really anything I dislike about it, is being around and seeing people lose people that they love.
Yeah.
And that part is definitely the least enjoyable part of the job. It's part of the job, and it's part of life, and it's something that we have to deal with. But that's probably my least favorite part of the job, besides the other things that I'd said.
Yeah. So the job must be like, is it mentally taxing too?
It can be, and the beauty of the fire station and how we work is that because we're together for 24 hours, you become more you become like a family, and the
Hmm.
people that you work with, you become pretty close to. So when we go on these calls where things are difficult, we can come back from those calls and we're around people that understand, and people that we can talk to. So that's a huge benefit, that when we come back from some of these calls that are very difficult, that we have peers and people that care about us, that we can talk to and help us through those difficult times.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. Uh, so what would you suggest to someone who wants to go into a similar field?
So what I suggest to anybody that asks me about the fire service is, and some of it depends on age.
Hmm.
So if we're talking about high school students, um, the first thing that I will tell you, I'm going to step back for 1 second.
Hmm.
One of the things we do at the fire service is we do public education, and we talk to students.
Hmm.
And we do public education and talk to students from kindergarten all the way up to sixth grade. And then we talk to them again as seniors in high school, as they're going off to college or leaving high school. So I do a fair amount of those talks. And one of the things that I would always say is that as a high school student, if you're interested in getting into the fire service, you need to do a few things. One of the things you need to do is stay out of trouble.
Hmm.
That's important, because at some point, people are going to ask you questions about your past, and you have to have answers that aren't going to disqualify you from the job. So that's one thing. Second thing is to work hard and get good grades, obviously. And then what I always tell students is graduate high school and go to college. Get an education, and get an education in a field that you can market.
Hmm.
So something where you have a marketable skill. If you want to go into the fire service, pursue that at the same time. But you should always have a plan B.
Hmm.
So getting a good education and having marketable skills are very important.
That's great advice, yeah. Let's see. Second to last question.
Sure.
What's a common misconception about your job that you want to clear up?
Well, one of the misconceptions, I was just talking about this the other day, is that firefighters are not intelligent people, and that it's just a blue collar grunt job, and that's the farthest thing from the truth. And as I spoke about a little bit earlier, we've got firefighters from all walks of life with all different skill sets, different levels of education, some very high. Almost all of our firefighters have college degrees, and then we have firefighters that have master's degrees. So that's one of the misconceptions, is that maybe they're not as educated as you would think, and that we sit around and don't do anything until a call comes in. So there's a misconception that you may be sitting around the firehouse doing nothing while you're waiting for a call to come in. And most of the time during the week, from 8 to 5, we're working, whether we're doing training or we're running calls, but most of the time we're working. And anything that you see on television about a fire department is not true. So
Okay.
just like the rest of the shows about police departments and everything else, not true at all.
Yeah. That's good to know. And then our final question is, if you had a tagline, what would your tagline be?
Well, my tagline for the fire service, because I was the public education coordinator and I've been involved in public education for almost my entire career, is that public education is the cornerstone of the fire service. So that's my tagline.
That's great. Yeah. And is there anything else you want to talk about? Yeah,
Well,
is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, I would really just like to tell your listeners that work hard, take pride in everything that you do, and you'll be successful. Things get difficult, and things can be very difficult right now, particularly with online learning, hybrid learning, and a lot of the stuff that's going on right now during the pandemic. That all is going to end. Life is going to get back to normal, and keep working hard. Try and stay positive. Happy people make the world a better place. So do your best. Remember that everything will pass. Things will get better. Take pride. Take pride in what you do, and you'll always be successful.
That's great. I think a lot of people need to hear that. So thank you for joining us today. This was really great. I learned a lot because, especially for me, I feel like a firefighter is something that I feel like I've heard a lot about, and I feel like I know a lot about, but from talking to you, I realized that I actually don't know much about it, and I learned so much just now. So
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you did. And in October, hopefully, we're going to have our annual open house. So that is going to be at the Palatine Fire Department Station 84, which is on Illinois Street, down the road from Fremd High School. It's usually the first Saturday in October every year. Hopefully we'll get to do it this year. We weren't able to do it last year, but if you want to learn more about the fire service, more about what goes on at a firehouse and a fire department, we'd love to have you, and we're always happy to answer questions. Anytime you see us out at a store or out on the street, if you have questions, you want to talk to us, come up. We're always happy to talk to people and tell you about the fire service.
thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Tune in every other Thursday for new episodes and leave us a review down below. Check out our Instagram at BY4Y Podcast for career resources and more information.